Excellent. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's quite exciting. I'm Kevin Jones. I'm the Workforce Development Officer for the National Youth Agency. And I'm just going to sort of do a bit of housekeeping, and then I'll hand over to Vanessa Rogers, who's running this webinar for us. So first things first, this is the first in a series of webinars that we've been able to put on, funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. And the idea is to support youth workers with some stuff to help them with their practice throughout the COVID crisis. So we're very grateful to the National Lottery to be able to put them on. There's a whole series of webinars coming up and podcasts and practice papers. So you've registered now, you're able to come into all of those. They're all free. Just before we start, and so yeah, it'd be great to see you and great to get some feedback about what you think of them all as well. So before we start, a couple of little bits of etiquette. The first thing is if you're able to put your camera on and you're happy to do so and your bandwidth allows, then please do, just because it's quite lonely up here by yourself, and it's nice to see people's reactions and stuff. There isn't any pressure involved with that. If you don't want to put your camera up, if you're having a day where you don't really want people to see your face, that's fine too, but if you can, then do. Secondly, if you can keep your microphones off until you've got something to say, just because you've all, I'm sure, witnessed the horrors of feedback and echoes and all of that sort of stuff. So we'll try and avoid that if we can. If you have got something to say, this is our first one, so we're winging it a little bit with this. There is a thumbs up icon that you can use, but Vanessa's going to be using slides, so she may not see you asking a question. So it might be necessary to pipe up as well, but we'll see how we go with that. I'm sure as the series runs on, we'll get better with it. The final thing, I was in a webinar meeting yesterday, and just an indicator of where we're getting to and how the COVID's kind of changing our environment. Somebody said, Caroline, is that a legacy hand, or is he willing to come in? Which I hadn't heard before. So if you put your thumb up and you want to say something, remember to take it down. We don't want any legacy thumbs. So thank you for that. I think that covers everything. So I'll shut up and hand over to the person who knows what they're doing, which is, and we're very, very happy that she's here. It's Vanessa Rogers. And the webinar today is about young people and anger management. Off you go, Vanessa.
Hiya, thanks, Kev, for that. Good morning, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces out there. And also great to meet new people. That has been, for me, one of the real benefits, of this time is, yeah, it's been really trying for everybody. And I'm talking about anger management. So a few of you might be feeling a bit stressed this morning or a bit angry. We'll see. But actually, the opportunities to talk, to reach out, to meet people, to do things in a slightly different way, actually, that's come about through this. So sometimes it's quite nice to focus on the positives too. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Vanessa Rogers. I was a senior manager for youth services in Hertfordshire for probably about 10, 15 years. Always around the targeted agenda, always worked with those young people that perhaps are seen to be a bit more risk than others. Done loads of anger management work during that time, specifically, working with the Youth Offending Service. And I've played around with the title because actually I have a bit of a problem with the term anger management. I don't know about you, but it almost feels, and young people used to say, what, I've come here, what, you're going to make me stop being angry? And that isn't what this is about at all. So if you're hoping that I'm going to be able to come here and tell you how we can quash other people's feelings, that isn't what I'm doing. But hopefully what I am going to be doing is going to be useful. I guess I'm more known now for training and been doing loads of online stuff, working with the NYA. If you haven't tried out one of our tea breaks, definitely something to do, really good fun. Youth workers around the country come together once a month, second Tuesday of the month, to talk about an aspect of youth work. So get your name down, it's free. And I also write a lot of resources, which I've been churning out during lockdown as well to try and support you lot in the field. But importantly, maybe, apart from this year, which is a bit different, I go back every year and I do at least 2 or 3 months back in the field, usually detached because that's where I come from. Came into youth work as a community artist back in the day, I was responsible for some pretty hideous subway murals, and graffiti every so often, just to challenge those stereotypes about middle-aged women. I get out my spray can once more. And it's always fun to see people's faces, just as you say, actually, I can do it. And there we are again. So things that make me happy, anything to do with art. So today we're talking about maybe those times when we're not feeling quite so happy. I'm going to share my screen with you now. I am hoping to get you to do a bit of breakout rooms as well, although I can't see that I've got at the moment the controls for that. So somebody might want to think about that, or maybe Kev will put you in, because I think it's good that you have a chat as well. But have a look, see what you think. Once it's up, I won't be able to see you, as he says, but just holler if you want to cut in. So this, again, as always, I've taken on a massive topic that I'm going to barely scratch the surface with. But, you know, I'm a game girl and I'm always willing to give it a go. So we're going to look at the basics of the anger management theory, because for me, understanding this really changed my practice, because when I got my head around what was happening behind what I could see, I found it easier to deal with. The stuff that it's based on, for those of you a bit like me, maybe a bit of a boff, like to know where stuff comes from, if you want to look it up, it's called therapeutic crisis intervention. It is American and it's not a new theory. It's been used a lot. It's used a lot in young offenders. It's used a lot within residential settings. This is, as I say, it's the basis of it, but obviously a lot of that isn't useful in the work that we do. Learning about triggers, understanding how triggers impact, and that whole think, feel, do. Again, once we get our heads around that, and understanding right from the start, and I'll probably say this more than once, is that in any situation, challenging or otherwise, you are not responsible for somebody else's behavior. That is their stuff, their responsibility. You are responsible for your own. And often in a difficult situation, it's what we do in that moment and our response that makes the difference towards whether things go up, up, up and escalate, and whether we can manage them and bring it back to cope better. So understanding triggers, identifying early warning signals, all of that stuff around building emotional literacy for young people so that they can, you know, talk it out rather than act out. And that's really what this whole thing's about. So it's part of a much wider training thing, but we're going to have a go and see what we can get through. So who wants to have a punt on this? You can call out for this. 5 basic emotions. Psychologists work out that all of our emotions come off of 5 basic emotions. Everything else is just a thing. Anybody want to give me a first one? I might start calling people out if they don't. So somebody yell out. Kev, you can go first. Give me one of the 5 basic emotions.
Happiness.
Absolutely. Happiness, the Ken Dodd variety and others, I'm showing my age there, is the greatest gift that we possess. Happiness, joy, all those things come off of that. Okay, what else have we got? That's the first one.
Annoyed.
What did somebody say?
Angry. Annoyed.
Angry, anger, that feeling of rage. Funny enough, anger is really linked to anxiety as well. And often the feelings that you get when you feel angry are pretty similar to anxiety, which are also pretty similar to excitement. So confusion of what we're feeling as well. So anger, yeah. What else?
Sadness.
Sadness, yeah. Feeling unhappy, feeling sad, yeah. Loneliness comes under that as well. You know, all of those things linked together. What else? So we've got happiness, sadness, anger.
Surprise.
Surprise, yes. And I was quite surprised by that. But yes, surprise. And I'll give you the last one because I doubt if you'll even get it, but you might. It's disgust. You know that feeling when you see, it's the ones that keep us safe. All of these keep us safe and express to other people how we're feeling. Disgust, when you smell something that's horrible and you can't help yourself, your face goes. Yeah, it's a basic emotion. Everything else comes off of that. So And anger is just an emotion. It is just the same as that. So although it might get a bad rap, it is the same as any other emotion. It's perfectly normal. It's usually linked to a sense of maybe being wronged, being shamed, being hurt, all those things. It is a natural part of your fight, flight or fight reaction, which was, again, when we were out there fighting woolly mammoths, kept us safe. We don't have to fight them anymore, but we still have the same inbred response. And when people say, I'm angry, you know what? That is a big old continuum, isn't it? From being mildly irritated right through to, depending on where you are in the country today, whether you're feeling mardy or tamping mad or raging or whatever that is, those feelings. And if it's just an emotion, how comes, you know, we shouldn't be punishing people for an emotion. We shouldn't be telling people that they shouldn't be feeling it or negating those things, and tend to do with it with anger. We tell people not to do it because actually, think of other extreme emotions. If you see somebody crying, you know, crying and anger are an extreme end of most people's emotional range. If you see somebody crying or upset and clearly looking traumatized, our initial response is usually we want to help them. We feel sorry for them. We feel empathy for them. We want to make it better for them. You know, we're kind. We treat it with kindness. We treat it with compassion. But if you see somebody being angry, you know, quite often they're told to get a grip. They're told to, you know, pack it in. They're told to calm down. They're told that it's, you know, they have to stop it now. They're actually just both the same kind of emotions, and they're a normal response, and actually could be a response to exactly the same situation. So invalidating emotions like that actually reinforces the trauma and reignites it. So by telling somebody to do that, you're actually damaging them. So what do you get from being angry? Well, actually, you can get quite a lot of things, really, can't you? For some people, it's an emotional release. It's, you know, their way of getting everything out. And after you've had a real good stomp around and felt really, really angry, often you end up feeling tired. You might feel a bit sad. You might feel a bit, you know, emotional, giving people that space. You might do that naturally for yourself, but we don't always do it for others. It is a massive emotional response. For some people, they might think it's the only way to get heard. And certainly the pictures that I had on here before were showing things like the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, this is anger. This is people feeling there is injustice being done. We are angry about this situation. We don't feel heard any other way. This is how we're getting you to listen to what we're saying. So anger spurs on really good stuff too. It can be the motivator for positive change. For some people, it's all wrapped up with who they are, and it's kind of almost a form of self-expression. You know, it can be, for me, I've got lots of children and I come from a big family. In my house, whoever shouts, you know, it's a loud house. People coming in, it's really boisterous, because I grew up knowing that you have to shout to get your voice heard. Otherwise, you know, nobody's really going to be, you've got to get your bit in first or you don't get. So those are all things that people do. There is also a more negative side to anger, where people use it to get power over others. And it's not, again, you know, we need to separate it out. It's not the anger, it's not the emotion that's the problem. It's actually around the behavior that can be linked to it, that can be problematic. Some people will use their anger to get what they want. Who's seen a toddler creating? You know, you say to a toddler, no, they go mad, don't they? Emotional flooding, throwing themselves on the floor, crying and screaming. And there was an advert on the telly a couple of years ago where they showed an adult actually mirroring that behavior. And it was hilarious. You know, it was a really successful advertising campaign. Why? Because we all kind of recognize that. And wouldn't it just be great sometimes, you know, when that Zoom meeting has crashed for the 15,000th time that day, when you can't do what you want to do, just to throw yourself on the floor and let it all go. But what happens if you give in to a toddler and you just give them what they want? They learn that in order to get what you want, You just create, you get angry, you kick off, you get aggressive, and you get what you want. And this is behavior that's working for you. And it's working for you at 2, it's working for you at age 5. By age 9, there starts to be complaints in school, and you're seen to be difficult or challenging behavior. But actually, it's behavior that you've learned and that's still working for you. When I used to go into work as part of the social care team for a long time, my team worked alongside, we had youth workers and social workers, do a lot of home visits. And one of the first things you used to work out when you got to that home visit was, who has the power in this family? Where does the power base sit here? And quite often it would be the 15-year-old young man who was lying on the sofa, hanging onto the remote or the devices to show that he was in charge, issuing his orders to the rest of the family. And you'd say to mum, well, you know, really need to get him into school. We need to start looking at a package. She's like, no, you know, if I tell him no, he goes mad. He kicks the door in, or he actually scared of that young person. Now, suddenly I come along, he's been pitched up because he's on to be told he's got to stop.
Oh,
hello, he's got to go on an anger management course. Well, what am I offering in exchange? That behavior works for him, and I'm telling him he's got to stop. So when we are looking at this whole thing, sometimes we need to look at what we're asking somebody to give up and what are they going to get instead? Because you might get kudos and status within your group for being the angriest, hardest of the hard girls, and I might not be that keen to give that up. But do people, I might say, I get respect. Do I? Well, actually, people probably think I'm a bit of a bully, and they probably don't like me very much. But I'm thinking I'm getting respect and it's working for me. So in any situation, we need to look at, what is this person getting from this behavior? Is it a true behavior? Is it a behavior linked to an emotion? Or actually is somebody harnessing that anger, using angry behavior to get what they want? Because it's a different response from us. 2 types of anger, basically. There's the push type, and that's, you know, the flooding of emotion. Something happens, bang, and oh, you know, you're angry. It's all disorganized. It's the most common form of anger, really. It's what we see most of the time. I mean, no anger comes from nothing, and I'll show you that in a minute. But that's the type. It's motivated by fear and frustration. And they call it the push anger. The other type is a bit darker. It's that which is motivated by manipulation. It's that stuff I was talking about. It's goal orientated. You are using your anger, your aggressive behavior, your power to get what you want. And actually, in terms of, I'm thinking of like youth clubs and things where things kick off, it's not always, you know, the young person who has caused the problem that is being the problem. So you'll see that a young person has maybe wound everybody else up to kick off, and they're standing in the side watching to see what's going to happen next. It's in charge. In our movies, so anybody who watches gangster movies, I don't watch a lot, but I do love a bit of Peaky Blinders and even EastEnders. So in EastEnders, right, we know Phil Mitchell is a hard man. And we know that because he says, I'm going to hurt you. It's not personal, it's business. And we know, oh, he's a real baddie. He means it. And that signal is used quite often, that deliberate control menace. That's not the same as anger when you're just like, that's controlling. So we see it on the television, we see it in movies, it's used all the time, but in real life it happens too. I suppose the full side of this, if you looked on your scale, would be kind of psychopathic behavior, which we don't, you know, there's not that many of them, thank goodness. On top of all of that, we have something that the press, you know, the red tops in particular, have coined lockdown anger. What's this about? Well, if you think about it, what do we do with people in the UK if they do something really, really wrong? We lock them up. We imprison them. We take away their freedoms and we put them inside. And in effect, that's kind of what's happened. We have been dictated to our usual days, the rhythm of our lives has been completely halted and changed because we're in a situation that we can't control. So is it any surprise that people are feeling frustrated, they're feeling angry? We also know, that whenever, in terms of youth offending and also in terms of children, looked after children, it all kicks off after Christmas because people have spent too much time together. You've got families who perhaps in the normal course of life wouldn't be spending that much time together, all inside with limited access to other things. It's almost like a little cauldron boiling. So one of the things that I've done for the MYA is I wrote a pack for young people around supporting them during this time, which is free to download off of the www.youthworksupport.co.uk. And if you haven't signed up to that, make sure you do. There's loads of stuff on there that's great for youth workers, lots of free downloads. And one of them, the idea being it's a workbook for young people to work through their anger, frustration, understand their patterns and how they feel. Can either do it alone or you can do it with digital youth work, with a youth work supporter. Because I think a lot of young people, they might be saying it's anger and they might be displaying angry behavior, but actually that isn't what they're feeling. There is a whole load of other feelings underneath that. Because anger can also be a substitute emotion. And during lockdown, what other emotions might that be masking? I'm going to put you into groups later, but I'll keep you at this there because I can't see how I can do that. What other emotions could anger be hiding for young people during lockdown? Anybody?
Frustration.
Scared.
Yeah, I think quite a lot of young people are scared and maybe embarrassed to say they feel scared. So it's coming out as anger or, kind of challenging behaviour, that great unknown. What else do people think? Anything else that they might be feeling?
Frustration.
Yeah, and I think everybody's feeling a bit frustrated. I mean, the big thing at the moment, it was almost, what are we going to do for Christmas? Even the advertisements that are on television are telling us Christmas is going to look a bit different this year. And that's kind of on that assumption again that everybody has a happy Christmas. For a lot of our more vulnerable young people, that's not so, we've got all those signals coming their way. So anger could also be a substitute emotion for fear, for sadness at what's been lost. And I know that for a lot of young people last year, so year 9s, year 6s and year 11s will have missed all their PSHE lessons. All that drug awareness, all that sex education, all that good stuff, I would say, that is put in June and July, they have totally missed. This is a moment for youth work because we can do that stuff and get involved in that. But they're missing stuff. No prom, no goodbyes. You left school, but you never got to say all of that, loss, loneliness. And another thing that young people were saying is, they are really missing people and they're missing contact, particularly with things like their partners, boyfriends, girlfriends. Kev.
Just a quick one, Vanessa, it's sort of meta dialogue really. If you want to split people into breakout rooms, Steve can do that for you.
Lovely. I'm going to yell to you in a minute, Steve, and ask you. So yeah, they're saying that adults in the home are not treating those relationships with any respect. So they may be their partner, the person that they're going out with might be somebody that offers them emotional support, as well as, love, friendship, warmth, even sex, and that they are used to seeing them on a daily basis. And suddenly that's been restricted. They might be seeing them in school, they might not be in their bubble anymore, but all their social elements are gone. And when they might say at home, I'm really missing so-and-so, they're told, oh, I know, but it's not like you're going to marry them, is it? It's only puppy love. I'm using an extreme, but it's certainly what young people are saying, that they are not being taken seriously and they don't know when it's going to end. And just remember how long those school holidays felt when you were a teenager. It was all right for the first few weeks, but actually sort of gagging to go back by the end of it. So expressing angers, the patterns of how we express our emotions are set at a really young age. And we probably all have different messages and have different experiences about how you showed anger at home and how that was acceptable or not acceptable. Plus, our first role models for conflict resolution are the people we live with. And that's great if your family is one that sits down and debates it around the table. But actually, if your family, there's maybe domestic abuse, we now know how traumatic that is for young people. Where are we showing them role models for being able to do this? You know, and that whole, as I said, invalidating those emotions or telling people to suppress it. In some cultures, maybe it's not seen to be very feminine to be angry. You know, what are we actually doing to young people? Gender differences. Well, for some young men, a lot of young men, anger is seen as quite a safe response. So to show that you're angry might be better than saying I'm scared or I'm concerned or I'm embarrassed. For example, one of the things that often happens is young people, we ask them that we're out on detached and we've got our quotas to get. We need to know who we're talking to. And so we know we're working with targeted young people because we've been told that's what we're doing. We're meeting the most vulnerable young people. And a big shout out to Detach because they've been doing a cracking job throughout this time. Absolutely. But first thing we say is, hello, what's your name? Right, can you fill this form in, please? Now, it's far easier for me to throw the form on the floor, tell the youth workers to F off and walk off into the distance. It's an acceptable response in front of my friends. I can show that. What's less acceptable is if I have to say, I can't read that, or I'm going to really struggle to do that. So sometimes it's about looking at, this is the presenting emotion, but what are young people really feeling? You know, because if you ever want to show young people, adults behaving particularly badly to each other and communicating in a way that would not be acceptable in any other place, get some clips off of Parliament, you know, when they're in the Houses of Commons, people jeering at each other, invalidating emotions left, right and centre, not showing any respect for differences of opinion and shouting each other down. The most aggressive wins. And, you know, Mrs. Thatcher, not a great fan, just putting it out there. But one of the reasons that she was put for voice coaching is that what tends to happen is that when women get angry, their voices raise. Yeah. And they get higher and higher and higher and higher. And you get somebody like Mr. Cameron say, calm down, dear. Whoa, you know, light that fuse and watch me go. So she learned to modulate her voice so that she talked like that a bit. My impressions aren't great, but you know what I'm saying. Because you're not taken seriously at a time when you are trying to express how you are feeling. Plus, from young ages, girls are rewarded for being nice. You know, what's that tale about, you know, sugar and spice and all things nice with a sweet disposition. We don't live in Jane Austen times, but they still resound. And there's those family and cultural ideas about behaviour. Maybe you get rewarded for not getting angry and behaving well. Then we've got all those historical links. You know, Victorian times, angry women who expressed emotions, you can get yourself locked up, you know, seen as being unstable, just too emotional, hysterical. And you still hear those, you know, those criticisms levelled at women when they're angrily expressing emotions, or it's seen as nagging and keeping on. All that stuff can lead you to tears as you're trying to express how you feel and somebody says, oh, are you all right? They wouldn't use that voice. And you just think, I am angry, I'm not sad. Misread the signs completely. So actually, when we're trying to deal with this is or to talk to people is to kind of help them with some of those feelings. Name that feeling. I can imagine that in your situation, I'd be feeling quite whatever it is. It may be that you are. A lot of young people say, you know, all those things, helping them name those feelings, name those words, rather than it's anger, because often it's not anger. It's other things that are going on underneath. We see in anger, but that is actually the secondary emotion. The primary emotion, as you said, might be fear, might be stress, might be frustration, all sorts of things. if we understand that, we respond differently. So finding the cause, then we can start to work out what the young person is actually trying to tell us. And that is really important because it determines the best way to respond to the problem or the behavior. You know, you can't feel fear if what you're recognizing, you might feel scared in a situation where somebody's really showing anger. But if you understand that that anger is coming from a place of isolation, of frustration and loneliness that has nothing to do with you, actually that's really going to change the way that you respond to it and the way that you answer that, because you respond to the emotion rather than the behavior that you're seeing. And understanding those triggers is key to all of this. So I'm now, Steve, yay, put people into their groups. What do you think are the main triggers, anger triggers for young people? This might be stuff you've seen. It might be stuff that you just kind of know. But I'm going to take 4 points from each group, or 3 points from each group, depending on how many groups we've got. So you've got 10 minutes to talk about, say hello, obviously first, nicely to each other, and think about your own triggers while you're in there as well. What really winds you up? And main triggers for young people. And then we'll have a look at some of the research that's been done. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and come back to you. Hiya. And Stephen, if you could put people into groups now, please. Hiya, as you'll come back in, can see, oh, and you were the first one to pop up there. Nice to see you. Oh, hi, Kate. I can see you again as well. That's nice.
Hi, can I interject quickly, please?
Certainly can, Emma. Was it Emma?
Yeah, Emma. Yeah, me. Sorry. I've actually got another training session that I need to be on in 15 minutes. Am I going to be able to gain access to the rest of this?
Yeah.
After obviously this is finished.
Yeah, sure. And for all of you, just to let you know, NYA is brilliant at this. So they'll send you the slides, you can have them. And also you can watch it. They put it on there. They've got a YouTube channel. If you haven't checked that out yet, there's some of the other ones on there. Jessica's nodding. Have you had a look at that? Yeah, it's all on there. So it's great.
It will be uploaded onto the online platform in the place where you click this to join this webinar. The recording will take the place of that link.
Perfect. So that means you can also share it with other colleagues as well that couldn't make it today, if you want to. But it means you can see all of them, even if you can't be at all of them. They've got some really good ones lined up. I got to do the jolly one. So how did people feel when they were talking about angry things? It's amazing how easy it is to reharness that anger as well. It's probably, you know, trying to remember your best day ever. You have to think about it quite hard, and then you can, and if you visualize it, you can start to remember some of those really positive feelings and that good stuff. But it is much easier to reignite anger, and that's quite interesting. You ever think about it? Try it out yourself afterwards. Not now, don't want anybody kicking off. So Kev,
Yes.
I asked everybody about in their groups to have a think about what they think the key triggers are for young people, either with young people they work with, or maybe they live with young people, but also sort of reflecting a bit on the triggers for themselves as well, whether they're similar. So let's have, I'm going to ask people, we've got loads of people on here, so let's have one idea from each group, and then any ideas that we haven't heard, let's chick them in over the top. Okay. So
breakout room 1, which was Emma, Kimberly, Megan and Rebecca. So any of them, do you want to just give us 1 point?
Yeah, Kimberly's unmuted herself. Come on, girl.
Hi, so one of the things we spoke about is doing stuff that they don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, well, being asked to do something and you don't want to do it.
And they don't want to do it, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And how good are you at doing things you don't want to do?
Okay, most of the time.
We might be able to hide it better, but often
Yeah.
the are the same, aren't they? You know,
Yeah.
if you don't want to do something, you feel frustrated, you feel cross, you feel put upon, you feel resentful because you've got to do it. Yeah, the thing you don't want to be doing in that situation is, so I say to Kimberly, go and put that chair back over the other side of the room. We all agreed that at the end of this session, we'd clear up. And Kimberly goes, make me. And I am stuffed because I know I can't make her. Kimberly knows I can't make her. And more importantly, every other young person knows I can't make her. And they're all sitting there and they're thinking, brilliant. Okay, let's see how she deals with that then. And who created that situation? I did. I enabled that to happen. It was me that was the catalyst. And we're going to talk a bit more about that later on. So doing things you don't want to do. Excellent. Group 2. Who's that, Kev?
That's Georgina, Hartlepool Youth Service, Holly, Mary and Owen.
Cool. All of Hartlepool Youth Service. That's a bit unfair in one group.
Yeah, sure. We were talking a little bit about kind of having a sense of injustice, so whether that could come in many different forms, but maybe even just being told by somebody in a position of power that no, you can't do that, but not being explained the reason why, and that's it. I said no, and that's what that means. And
yeah, and no
left frustrated.
No. Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's very true. Thanks, Holly. Okay, let's have another group. You're hitting all the 6 basic trigger threats that I'm going to show you in a minute at the moment.
So number 3 is the rest of Hartlepool Youth Service, a different Holly, Kirsty and Mel. Anyone from there?
Go on, Mel, unmute yourself.
Hiya.
Hiya.
We said if they feel disrespected or not listened to.
Yes, being not listened to in particular is a really big one. And when I do this with young people, there's a few, I've got like a trigger list that young people can look at and decide, does that make me angry or not? That comes up in the top 3 every time I've ever done that exercise. And that actually, those trigger lists are in that freebie pack, or a version of not being listened to. And you know yourself how frustrating that is. What happens when you're not listened to? You shout a bit more and you get a bit closer. Often, if you've ever watched when an altercation that comes maybe even to blows happens, one person is saying something, the other person isn't listening, they feel is not understanding. They step forward, the other person steps forward, you step forward and pow, there's nowhere else to go apart from get out of my face. Now, in non-COVID times, because obviously we want to be teaching young people the skills to cope with their emotions better, A, to name them so they're responding to what's actually going on, and B, to cope better. It's a really simple exercise. Imagine splitting you all in half, one side of the room, one side of the room, A's and B's. I get A's to walk purposefully, but not threateningly, across the room to a partner on the other side. B's, when that person is close enough, you put your hand up and that person can come no closer. We all stand, we look and we marvel at how they're all different and we all have different personal space. Do it again. This time when the B's walk to the A's, put their hand up again, different spaces. I tell them to take one step forward. And you can literally feel the electricity as somebody walks into your space and it's like, whoa, get out, get out. And that demonstrates before people are angry, because you don't want to be teaching people about anger when they're absolutely, at the end of their tether. About when we say to people, give someone space, get out of their faces. That is what we're talking about. And you can feel it. It's horrible. It feels like an invasion, even when it's somebody that you like, you're quite in a relaxed situation. So it's a good way of demonstrating that. Okay, Kev, group 3.
Always group 4. Amanda, Jessica, Kelly and Michael.
Yeah, no hiding, Kelly, because I can see you as well. So you're on my front screen.
That's fine. I thought of lack of control when they can't control anything to do with how they have to live.
Perfect. That is absolutely so true. And if you have done work with young people in care, and often they, you're told these are very angry young people, I'm not surprised. Everything is restricted, decisions being made, things happening that are totally out of their control. It makes you angry, definitely. It's another of those top 6 trigger threats that we all have, but particularly for young people. Yeah, Group 5 or group 6, whichever we've got to.
It's group 5, Amanda, Kate and Natalia.
Pressure, like expectation.
Yeah, pressure, and you know, whether that's pressure on you to behave or pressure on you to behave badly, it has the same effect. Okay, another group.
Group 6 was David, Helen, and is it Jinx J?
Jinx J, that's a great name.
Hmm.
David, I can see you with your headphones on, so put off that mute button and speak. Whoever.
Oh, well done, David.
All right.
Sorry, I wasn't picking on you, darling, but I was a bit, wasn't I, really? Sorry.
Yeah, you've been a bit of a bully there, weren't you?
I know
really?
I was. I told you,
Getting
I
my
know
anger
you
up.
liked me.
Yeah, I think we've come up with near enough so far what's been said. So I
Okay.
think they're taking all our ideas so far.
Oh, that's frustrating. Okay. Anything?
That is, made me angry now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Out of control, see? Out of your control. Anybody, any other groups with different things then before?
I've got a mirrored or a learnt behavior, because anger can be copied. Just that's their natural reaction to how they've seen it dealt with, so they just do the same.
Absolutely. And as I say, how you grow up, your early role models from coping with your feelings and managing aggression and anger, and seeing what people get from it. So if you see that somebody always gets their own way because they bully beef their way through everything, then, you know, all we do need to look at, and again, I always bring up gender in this, is around what's sometimes seen as aggressive in women. It would be seen as assertive in males. And we need to be careful of that. And some of those stereotypes, I'm thinking for Black women, for example, you know, it's not aggression, but it can be perceived as such. And how we challenge some of those. Okay, last group, anything different before we move on? And I'll share with you the 6 basic trigger threats. I think we got most of them.
We had humiliation or embarrassment.
Yes, shame is a big one, actually. Shaming somebody, and it's met with anger, because actually what they want to do is cry. And again, that's not, it may be anger, but is that the real emotion they're feeling? No. And that's the thing with this. Often it isn't anger, and we need to be looking to see what is actually going on. There it is. Actually, at the moment, I thought I was going to cry there. Right, okay, I thought I'd lost the whole thing. So 6 basic trigger threats. The unknown, you know, not knowing what's going to happen, linked to this loss of control and power. Rejection, you know, feeling you're not good enough, or the humiliation linked to that, and shaming, isolation, failure, death, loss. Now, how many of those triggers do you think are being hit through COVID and these COVID times we're living through? If these are the main 6, you know, trigger threats that trigger anger, pretty much all of them. Bernardo's have done some lockdown research. I know the NYO as well, so definitely have a look at that. But they were saying that the main things for young people around affecting their mood and behaviour, and that is being seen as anger, this lockdown rage, is around, as I've already said, missing that social contact, missing that peer support. So I think that's why digital youth work is doing so really well at the moment. You know, it's having a bit of a time, and hopefully those of us that have never done it before, we can all learn. Lack of personal space, you know, not being able to take yourself off somewhere to get your head together, too much focus on schoolwork, or worrying about missing it, kind of having the same stuff. Parents who are going mad at you because you're not doing it and you're upstairs playing on your, you know, your Switch, and those that are absolutely making you sit down every night. They're also pretty cross around, they think that they're not really affected by COVID, and if they get it, they won't get it as badly, although they're, you know, that's changed slightly. But they are the group that they feel is most impacted on. It's their education that's been stopped. It was, you know, it's their chances, their opportunities, their future. The world is looking different. And I guess I've heard adults, actually, I'll name this, it was a single friend said to me, oh my God, am I ever going to get a date again? I need to be out there finding someone. How am I ever going to do that in COVID times? And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, that's you. But what about if you're 14, 15? The importance of that first relationships, finding someone, all of that, you might think that's it. We're all going to be, you know, stuck with only 6 people in a bubble forevermore, as well as those risks at home that were already there. So in other triggers, there's hundreds. And if we start adding to that things like substance misuse, which impact on your behavior, things like jealousy, rejection, all those things. I've worked with loads of young people that end up in trouble, particularly on offending, with violence because somebody has said something about their mum. Now, the fact that they have a really poor relationship, maybe they've been through the care system, maybe they hardly see this person. That was the trigger, you know, somebody said something. And alongside that, the expectations. One young man said to me, I know you're right, Vanessa, and I know that I don't want to go to, you know, I'm 17, so I don't want to end up inside. I know that this behaviour isn't suiting me well and I want to change it. But you know what? If I'm faced with the same situation again, I'm still going to have to clatter that person, because if I don't, my family will feel that I've let them down. I will get a beating off my brother or my dad for not standing up for our honour, not defending. It's you know, these long-standing arguments that so there's lots of reasons for it. But if we want to be coping with it, we need to be looking wider. So when we see young people, we don't know any of this, do we? We don't know what's going on in their lives. We don't know where they've been leading up to that time they get to us. So it may be that they woke up late, they were told off, went out without any breakfast, or there wasn't any, and they're hungry by 10 o'clock. They're cold, they're fed up, they got told off all day at school, they feel unreasonably picked on, they were blamed for doing something they didn't do. That usually comes really high. The one that comes highest in anger triggers when I do it with young people is being told lies to. Yeah, something young people say they absolutely hate. And my thoughts are, who of us can honestly put our hand up and say we've never told a lie? Honesty is something we prize highly in others, but don't necessarily are prepared to give ourselves. But all of this has happened. Stress, pressure, stress, pressure, stress, pressure, stress, pressure. They're with us and we say something fairly innocuous like, did you remember to bring your consent form this time? And they go, pow, mental. You get the full show of emotion. Are they cross with you? No, they're not. Actually, it's everything else that led up to that behaviour and that final trigger that went pow over the top. So when we want it, you know, obviously for health and safety, we have to deal at top level. If there's something happening, we have to cope with that to keep everybody else safe. But if we want to effect change and help young people actually manage their feelings and their emotions better and to learn from it, actually we need to be working on the stuff that's going on underneath. You know, other things that light that anger fuse, that last thing, being asked to do something, yeah, you don't want to do, yep. But things like somebody laughing at you, whispering, acting like this whole thing is a waste of your time, you know, finishing other people's sentencing, assuming you know what they're going to say, stuff like tutting or kissing your teeth, really irritating. You know, somebody pretending they can't hear you. It lights that fuse and you see that behaviour. Because thinking about it makes you even more angry. So once you sense an injustice to you, the anger's fed and it festers and something happens and then you can't, it's that thoughts that go through your head. And some young people will say it's almost like on a loop. They can't think of anything else. It's just going round and round and round. And all you need is somebody on the side saying maybe, I don't know if it's a young man, maybe a heterosexual young man, his girlfriend going, I wouldn't stand for that. He's disrespecting you. I wouldn't do that. Go on. If you're a man, go on, go on, go on, hit him, hit him. You know, when they all fight, 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 fight. So we want to sort these out. Things that definitely do not work. In a conflict situation where maybe the whole world has gone pow, attempting to prove who's right and who's wrong doesn't work. It really doesn't. It just lights that fuse and gets everybody wound up even more than ever. Other things that don't work is, they've put bragging, but actually it should be bagging things together. Now, sometimes this is seen as feminine behaviour. I don't know. but it certainly gets accused of. So my husband does something I don't like, I have a moan, and then I say, and another thing, you haven't put out the bins either, have you? And you promised you'd do that. And another thing, I wasn't very happy when you did A, B, and C. Oh, and another thing, don't think I've forgotten about when you did this in 1998. We went to school together. So, you know, it's all that stuff doesn't help at all. Trying to attack people, you know, you sometimes see it in old school films where maybe it's a teacher, or maybe it happened to you, you know, when you're saying, Kelly, I can see you're talking to David there when I'm trying to talk. Well, clearly what you're saying is far more important than anything I could possibly have to say. So perhaps you and David would like to tell us all what you were talking about there. You know, that shaming, that embarrassment that actually is not going to resolve that conflict. It's just going to escalate things even more. There doesn't have to be winners and losers, you know. So next time it's happening, you know, some people might be thinking, I should be able to cope with this. I'm the adult here. I'm in charge. You have to show young people who's boss. You have to show them that you're in charge. Otherwise, they take advantage. You know, that whole thing about give them an inch, they take a mile. That's not the best way to do it with it. Other things is this negative phasing. How irritating is it when you are feeling angry or you're trying to express yourself and somebody says, stop being silly. It wasn't like that. You know, playing the whole thing down, or asking somebody to be good, again, negating those emotions, or just, oh, what a fuss over nothing. You've probably got your own personal favourite. Get a grip, you know, get a grip, grow up, why can't you? All those things, or somebody saying, well, why can't you be more like so-and-so? They, when I ask them to do something, they don't do this. That is not going to help. It feeds into this whole experience of, if I'm angry and I'm trying to tell you something, you're not listening to me. It's only going to take that whole thing up. It's not going to stabilize what's going on. Pointing, raising your voice, you know, saying, how dare you, and stop shouting whilst shouting at yourself. You know, when you hear people shouting at their kids, do you want a smack? No, of course nobody wants to smack. Stop shouting and calm down. All of those things are perceived as aggression. And what does happen is, if we were in the room together, what we would find is that people actually start to mirror each other. It is perfectly normal to, you know, if we were all sitting together, we'd probably look across, and people who are either sitting to each other's side or have been in a group, we look at that group, you'd all be, you know, maybe with your arms, people have their legs out. You look next time you're in a group. In an angry situation, if you're trying to deal with it, you need to really be careful that what you're not doing is mirroring the aggressive behavior back. So what happens when people are getting angry? They puff up, they do that. It's normal. It's part of this fight or flight. You are filling that space to make that woolly mammoth think that you're big and large and scary. If you're doing it back unconsciously, what you're actually saying in your non-verbals is, come on then, if you're up for it, come on then, if you're hard enough. That's not what you want to be saying. Because again, the response is going to be, think about who's best to deal with it. It isn't a sign of weakness if actually you have a better relationship with that young person or your colleague does. We don't work on our own, you know, not very often. If you're out on detached, who's the best person to actually respond to this situation here and now? And it might not be you. And that isn't a loss of face, whilst not undermining each other, obviously, because we don't want to play that great game of play one youth worker off against the other. You know, I'm not going to ask Megan because she's nasty, but I would always ask, you know, Kelly, because she always says yes. We don't want that either. But actually really keeping a grip on what you're doing. Again, the outcome is affected by your response and what you do. Other things that don't work, you know, trying to make someone see reason when they are seething with rage. They can't. Your brain doesn't work like that. And teenage brains, as we know, are not fully developed like adults yet. The bits that actually help them see reason and think things through and consequences and all those doesn't really come fully into play until, for young women, it's in their early 20s. 21's about the age for full brain development, if we all remember our adolescent development training, and 23, 24 for young men. So yeah, actually, in terms of brain maturity, girls do mature faster than boys. But that stuff is not going to work. Using sarcasm and putting people down, using your adult power to make somebody look stupid. You might shut them up, but just consider the damage you're doing to them. The other things that don't work, trying to get young people, trying to get people to take sides, unhelpful. You want to lose that audience. Don't want other young people seeing what you're doing. And don't make empty threats, because if I say to a young person, right, if you keep doing that, I'm going to call the police. I'm going to count to 3, 3, 2.5, 2.25. They know I'm not going to do it. And again, I have created that situation, using emotional blackmail. Oh, please don't. I've had a really hard day. We've been so busy and I'm tired. Please behave. And once it's done, it's done. Don't keep going back to it and digging at it and picking at it, because it just makes things worse. So actually, if we want to affect permanent change, we kind of need to be supporting young people to learn how to cope. Learning to name your emotions. And as I say, actually helping, not when people are really, really angry, but when they're not. That's exciting for you. I guess you're feeling, I can see, I'm thinking, I'm seeing you, and I'm sensing that you're feeling. Am I right in thinking that that's really worrying for you? Or if that was me, I would feel, quite concerned about that. How are you feeling? Not in a patronizing way, in a way that shows interest, using our usual youth work skills, identifying, so that acknowledging the anger, not just pretending that nothing's going on. I can see you're angry. I can hear you're angry. Do you want to talk about it? Letting people just talk, just speak, and knowing yourself. I know I'm a fixer. So somebody phones me up within 2 seconds. Oh, I'm problem solving. I'm helpfully putting, well, what they could do. They don't want that. It took me years to realize that people don't want that. What they want me to do is just to listen without judgment, just to be a soundboard to let somebody really get all those feelings, all that stuff. Tell me about it. I don't have to agree with them to listen. And that isn't condoning bad behavior. When people feel calmer, helping them to understand triggers and patterns. So I think we've been here before, haven't we? That was how did you cope last time? Were you pleased with the outcome? How did that work? I was really impressed that actually this time around you didn't do, I saw how difficult that was for you. Well done. So trying different things, because we are all wired differently, to help people to cope and to help people to get those feelings out, because we know that when they don't, that's when the damage is done to kind of mental health. And there's a lot out there on the internet at the moment, which is quite good, that we can kind of use. This whole movement about it's okay to not be okay. And probably for the first time ever, you may have found yourself doing this. When people join the training in the morning, even online, I say to people, how are you? And I actually want to know. I mean it. I'm interested. I want to know, are you okay? I'm checking in with you. Whereas, before you might walk past and go, all right, to somebody. You do if you come from where I do. All right. I might say, all right, back. And that's it. Nobody's actually said anything. It's an acknowledgement, but actually you're not okay. That's all right. Accepting that, and deal with them, and talk about it as part of everyday life. Role model that yourself. Talk about your emotions. Show better role models, I guess, and understand what motivates you as well. Think about those situations that you have found difficult to deal with, or that maybe where something's kicked off and perhaps you weren't very pleased with how it ended up. when I do this in a wider training session, I'm often struck that where I get people to think about the last conflict they had, whether that's with a young person, it might have been at home, whatever. And then, you know, what they did and how pleased they were with the outcome and give themselves a score out of 10 with how well they managed that situation. And kind of what I've noticed over the years is that people tend to score themselves highly if they got their own way. That what happened was that there was an argument or a conflict and they won in their view. And I thought maybe that's something we all do. We measure by whether we got our own way, and that's seen as success. So actually having a think about the last time things didn't work out or something did, and scoring, how was it for each person involved? You know, how did that young person end up at the end of that? Was it something they can learn from, or did you just grind them into the ground to get what you wanted from them? And understanding, obviously, we all feel differently. What might get your goat, what might get you really angry? I might think, I mean, road rage is one of them. I know people get really, really wound up when they're driving, about other people's driving, about people going in your parking space, about traffic jams. And it's not something that triggers me. And I honestly cannot see why anybody would get themselves wound up over that. But I accept that other people do. And it's not very helpful, me saying, well, what's the problem? So understanding what your own is, and then with those, because this cognitive triangle, and yeah, part of CBT and all that stuff, actually really important, because understanding how our behavior is affected by the thoughts that we have and our emotions, and that affects the outcome, is really important. So for example, say the trigger is, I go up to the MYA and we have a little staff outing, yeah, but I wasn't expecting to go. So I'm staying over because I'm doing some training. And I come downstairs and I see Debs, because I know she's there somewhere. And she said to me, let's go out for a drink afterwards, Rogers. Come on, we'll go out for a meal. And I think, you know what? I haven't been out for ages. And I tarp myself up and I put on whatever I've got, because I ain't got much, you know, and I tarp myself up for a night out. And I say to her, what do you think? And she says, mutton and lamb springs to mind. A woman of your age shouldn't be wearing a skirt that short. And I think to myself, you cow. Yeah, I am all right. You know, I get myself really, really, really wound up, because actually it's the emotions that are driving it, aren't they? What am I feeling? I feel ashamed. I feel embarrassed. I feel all those things, belittled. I thought she was my mate. Now, if I don't go back and think that through a bit more and go just from emotion driven to behavior, I'm going to clock her one, aren't I, for being such a cow? I wouldn't, Deb, I love you. But if I think it through a bit more and I think, well, why would she say a thing like that? That's not very nice. I thought she was my mate. And actually, I know I look all right because I've worn this loads of times and somebody would have said something. Plus, she don't look that great herself. My behavior is going to be different, isn't it? So once young people calm down, actually doing this think, feel, do, rather than trigger, feel, act. It slows it down. With maturity, you know, hopefully we all get it. Some people never learn. Some people are driven. You might know somebody who's always driven by emotions because they haven't got that there. I think we can help people do that. I'm checking on my time. So in a difficult situation, actually do a self-check. Is what I'm thinking true? Where's my evidence for that? Yeah. So I'm thinking that Deb's been horrible, but and that I've made a fool of myself. But actually, where's my evidence for that? How do I feel? How should I respond? What's going to be the likely outcome? Think, feel, do. It's really important. And even if you just use the think, feel, do in a difficult situation with young people, maybe where you're not sure how to handle it, taking that mental step back will give you enough time, hopefully, it puts in that gap that you'll make better choices and a better decision, which hopefully will give you a better outcome. So with the young person, name it, define the problem, listen, check out how they're feeling, and empathize to try and see the problem. All our non-verbal and verbal. Then how can I help? Don't ever say to somebody, I know how you feel. You don't. You've got no idea how they feel. And almost worse, I know how you feel. And then you start unloading all your old stuff onto them, telling them all about how bad it is for you. It's not a competition, is it? The other thing we can't do, we can't reassure everybody that everything's going to be all right, especially at the moment. It might not. You know, all those fears, those things that they're worried about, that might happen. We don't know. All we can do is put it into perspective and do that. Is it true? Where's our evidence? You know, check through that checklist to get ourselves thinking better. And always provide a way out for young people. Yeah. So rather than when I was threatening to chuck people out, don't back them into the corner, you know, especially in front of peers, because you're going to lose. And it's very difficult then, because every time something kicks off, it almost repeats that pattern. Young people are waiting for you to start short so they can wind you up and do it again. Always think about like in clubs and pubs, and we can learn a lot from hacienda days. So if there's an argument or there's a fight or something kicks off, what happens? Bouncers change the environment. We turn the lights go on, the windows, the doors are open. Why is that? Because actually when you start to feel angry, that whole fight flight stuff going around your body makes your temperature rise as your heartbeat increases, as all that blood pumps to your muscles. Let's cool people down, you know, literally cool them down, change the environment, lose the audience, get rid of everybody else, then deal with the situation. And let people finish. Don't start chirping in over the top with your two penneth, and then respond and actually kind of set an expectation that they'll listen to, and try not to raise your voice, you know, because otherwise all that happens is you're shouting, they're shouting, you're shouting, it gets louder and louder and louder. Again, playing into this whole stuff that's going on internally. Role model the behavior you want, you know. And de-escalate it. We talked about this. Keep yourself, maintain that distance. Don't walk into their space. Stand yourself slightly on. Anybody who's ever done any boxing, even boxercise, first thing they teach you to do is how to stand. And it's that slightly to one side, because it makes it harder to push you over, you know. Leave an open door, relax your hands. I always do a really deep breath, you know, almost like I ground myself, almost like I'm going into battle. So feel your feet on the floor. You're there. You're all right. You know, regular breathing. If somebody's, you know, manage those height differences, think about that adult power. If you've got a small 13-year-old, get down to the same sort of height rather than looming over somebody, because you might be feeling scared, but what you're presenting as is looming over the top. You don't know who else has used that height imbalance or that power imbalance before in different situations. You might be triggering stuff that's got nothing to do with this situation. You know, be really aware of that, and giving people choices. Things like, where do you want to talk about this? Do you want to do it here? Should we go to the office? You know, I'm thinking of youth centre days, wherever it might be. Do you want to talk now, or do you need 5 minutes? I'm happy to, you know, come back to you on this. Or diversion, you know, I'm making a drink. Do you want coffee or tea? Do you want squash? What do you want? So that people are, it's cutting through that anger. When it's all over, do you want to go back and sit on your own? Do you need some time, or do you want to be with your friends? Where do you want to be? Giving people lots of choices, you know, words or pictures. I've put loads here, actually. Do you want to stand up, or are you happy sitting there? All those things that in situations, as we said, young people feel they've got no choices, decisions are being made for them. In any situation, we have a choice. And trying to give some choices kind of calms that situation down. Obviously, what you wouldn't do is rapidly fire off 25, because when you're feeling in a heightened state, it's difficult to hear any of that. Make sure as well that you are afterwards, you kind of review what happened. You can do it with young people, but also with your co-workers. How, you know, so that after anything you learn from it, see it as a learning experience. Yeah, if there's been damage or there's been a relationship breakdown, is it possible to put it right, and how do we do it? But don't get tempted to go rushing straight in. You know, things that really help is positive self-talk. You know, that whole trying a mantra that works for you. And it doesn't necessarily need to be any of these. It could be something that works for you, that reminds you that you're okay. And trying to get young people to try this too, almost being kind to themselves, having a, you know, an internal dialogue that's telling you to calm, to cope. I can do this. I can do this. Mine is, which is not something I wouldn't say to somebody else, is get a grip. I say it a lot, too much, far too much. My daughter pointed out, I say it nearly 15 times a day. What I actually mean is, I'm not sure what I'm going to do here. Just get a grip, sort it out. All those things, because the places that you're most likely to be assaulted, if there's going to be a violent outburst, trigger goes up to a crescendo, which is violence at the top, comes down on the other side like a slope. It is easy to see that you need to keep out of the way when somebody is chucking the furniture about and shrieking their heads off. But we often miss those other times, which are really common. And that is between where you're triggering and starting to feel angry, between that becoming aggressive and the trigger getting in there, and the main time is coming down the other side, because it takes people half an hour, 45 minutes for all that adrenaline to go back to pre-crisis state. And sometimes what happens is a young person is using their coping strategy that they've been taught, which is to walk away. So there's a kerfuffle, there's a big argument, it may not even be with you, but there is some kind of altercation. They walk off, remove themselves, and you go after them, give them a minute, and then you go after them to see if they're all right. And you just put your hand on their shoulder, say, I'm just checking in, you're okay. And that is the trigger, and I get off, and that's when you get assaulted. And it's worth thinking about, you know, giving yourself, if they're younger, really young, and they need to be kept safe, keep them where you can see them. But for the most part, if somebody is gone, keep that space, keep that distance, and allow a good 10 minutes longer than you want to go to before you go and talk to somebody about it. Other things, these are just some stuff that, you know, actually I'm talking about helping children and young people cope with their feelings. This is something I used to use quite a lot with young people whose emotional literacy isn't great, talking about how they're feeling. Not when people are angry, and that is around having. I mean, I've even had a color chart on in some places, like a thermometer. If you think about colors, tend to represent different emotions and feelings for everybody. So if I say what color, when I say the color red, what color does that emotion does that mean for you? Some people will say love and warmth. Others will say anger or jealousy, whatever it might be. Get them to think about those colors and name them. And then you're just asking people, what sort of a day is it? It's a blue day. It's a red day. It's a green day. It's a shorthand version of being able to explain how you feel. And if young people want to understand their feelings, is to keep a color diary, you know, over the space of a month, what days, how many days did you feel this? Did you feel that? So that they're actually getting some skills there. And we've been talking about anger, and we're coming up. I'm going to stop sharing in a minute, but I'm going to do a little de-stress technique with all of you just to finish off. So what I want you to do is to imagine we are having a great big party. We're about to do the Macarena. So put our arms out in front like that. All put our arms out as far as we can. And I want you to clench your fists hard. I'm going to count to 10, and I want you to keep crunching them. So 1, 2, 3, stop dropping your arms. 4, 5, clench hard. 6, 7, 8, 9, extra squeeze. 10, and then slowly undo your fingers and put them straight. Hey, do you feel that tension just relaxing as it goes? There we go. I'm going to come back to you now that you're all feeling calm and we've shaken that anger out of ourselves. Okay, so we don't have any more time. We're running out. I'm going to give it over to Kev for the last words. I hope that's been useful. You know, have a look at the slides. On the ends, there's a couple more extra anger management techniques that you can try out with young people. It doesn't solve everything, but enabling young people to really understand their feelings and for you to understand where these triggers come from and how that impacts on think, feel, do. Really important. As I say, it changed for me how I dealt with things, and certainly understanding gives us better, you know, confidence in coping with difficult situations. Okay, thank you, Kev. Back over to you.